If I haven't met you yet, my name's Kurt. Glad to be with you today. I'm one of the pastors here on the team, and today I wanted to start with a different question, actually. And I wonder if you can relate to this, but have you ever found yourself waiting for an opportunity, waiting for a door to open for what seemed like forever? Like you're waiting and hoping, and I know what this is like. This idea for me has been, it's like, I think I'm supposed to be pursuing something. I think I'm supposed to be doing something. But every time I think that the door is going to be opened, it metaphorically gets slammed back in my face. No one relates to this, right? Yeah, and this idea of waiting is hard. I don't like waiting. I'm one of those people who has the fear of missing out, FOMO. Like, I just love, let's just go and let's go now. And waiting can be hard. For some people, waiting is actually part of their career. If you know anything about nature photographers, for instance, nature photographers have to just wait and wait and wait until they get the perfect shot of the mama seal cuddling with the baby seal, because that's what you want to see. You don't want to see them just casually doing whatever they do. You want to see something that makes you feel stuff. Yeah. It's our fault, by the way, that they have to wait so long for the perfect shot. But nature photographers, they get this. They wait and they stalk like they're stalking prey, except their ammunition is just a lens. And they wait around until the perfect moment. And then all of a sudden, a door that doesn't seem open is kind of open. Sports photographers do something similar, except sometimes for sports, it's fast-paced. You have to sort of track with what's happening in front of you, because you could miss the open door opportunity. You could actually miss the thing that you're there to capture. Different kind of waiting nonetheless. It's interesting, though. This last month, there was a photographer who was filming a surf competition in California, the beach. And he was there, and something fascinating happened that shouldn't happen. It's almost like the nature photography and sports photography intersected at the perfect moment. A door opened that just probably won't open again. And I'd like to show you the picture. This is of a great white shark and a surfer. And he snapped the photo at this competition, and a great white shark at the perfect moment leaps out of the water. That's epic. So this writer in the Washington Post is chronicling this. This was on October 22nd, so very recent that this took place. And this is what they describe it as. It says, on the morning of Saturday, October 22nd, freelance photographer Jordan Anast aimed his camera at professional surfer Tyler Warren while working the San Onofre, I don't know how to say that word, surfing club contest in California. As he photographed Warren, a great white shark shot out of the ocean, clearing the water entirely. Now, if you're a photographer for sports, this really shouldn't happen. This is a unique sport, don't get me wrong. If this happens at the basketball game, everyone's like, the apocalypse is here, right? Or Sharknado. And we don't want Sharknado if you saw that silly film, right? There was a 2, a 3, and a 4. If you don't know what I'm talking about, a movie that's all about a tornado taking sharks to land and eating people. Yeah, I don't know. And they made lots of them because it was so bad that it was good. Again, it's our fault. Those of us who binge weird things. But this photographer had been a photographer for 20 years. 20 years. And out of the blue, the career shot pops open. The door just opened up. He wasn't looking for the door, honestly. He was looking for a good shot of a surfer on a wave. And the shark showed up. And this doesn't come easy, right? If you're a photographer and you're waiting and waiting and waiting and trying to get the perfect shot, this is a big deal. This is how it was described at the end of the article. Anast, the photographer, said, he's archived 2.5 million photos in his decades-long career. It was actually a 20-year career. And he's only got one with a surfer being photobombed by a great white shark. He suspects it's the only one he'll ever get, probably that anyone will ever get. Yeah. Nature opened up the door, so to speak. Now, here's the thing, photographers get this. They wait and wait and wait and hope that the door opens, that their lens has the best view possible, and they capture something. And in our lives, in my life, like I said, I don't like to wait. Waiting is the worst. It really is. I've had to learn a discipline because I know my natural personality is not loving waiting. I've had to learn a discipline, and it's the word no. I have to say no more than I am inclined to say no. No to opportunities, no to the next thing. Because if I don't say no, I spread myself out and I end up saying yes and not really experiencing the glory and beauty that is life, right? And so I know that about myself. Waiting games that I've experienced for jobs. Hello, I'm here, right? That was a bit of a wait. Other experiences, loves. I can remember as a young man, I was like, God, I'm so ready for a wife. Come on. I'm very spiritual. I'm mature. I was not mature, let's be honest, okay? Not even close. 20-something early, I was not mature. And I waited, and it felt like I waited forever and ever and ever to find the perfect lady. And then the door opened, and I'll promise you she is perfect. She's going to watch this later. She's not here today, so she'll remember I called her perfect in public. Oh, yeah. Whew. I wrote a book. Some of you know about that. And the first opportunity to talk to a literary agent about the idea of writing a book, I was pursued by a literary agent. From that day to writing the book, 10 years. I had to wait. I had to grow. I had to learn. I had to move into stuff. I don't like it, though. Sometimes it's good, but I don't love it. We all know what it's like to feel like the metaphorical door has been slammed in our face. Sometimes we're looking at the wrong door. Sometimes we're pursuing the wrong thing. And that door slamming is actually wonderful. Sometimes things simply don't work out that could have been great. And we have to just sort of deal with that. Career things didn't work out that we thought would. Unanswered prayers, right? We feel that things didn't come together and God could have done something, and for whatever reason, it doesn't seem to have gone that way. Family challenges, doors that we think should be open get shut, and we're left wondering, how do we move forward? Why should we move forward sometimes? And honestly, I get it, but you know who really gets it? God gets it. God gets the reality that doors open only to be closed. At least that's how we feel or experience them. Sometimes a door feels like it's been locked down, and there's no opening the deadbolt. You've lost the key. You have no access. And so today what I want to do is I want to talk about a particular kind of door that Jesus opens up. In fact, I want us to sort of rally around one big idea today, that Jesus opens up the door to love neighbors he is for. And we're going to really lean into this morning because I think that if we can reframe the door that we're trying to pursue, if we can reframe sort of the opening we're looking for, that all the other doors, all the other things that don't seem to come together, find their meaning in a door that is always open. So, what do we do with the door if it's open? Excuse me. Well, what we'll find in Scripture is that the door that Jesus opens is usually others-oriented. It's usually pointing us through something that takes us to someone. And that door is something that today's passage is going to really highlight. And so to kind of understand this idea that Jesus opens up the door to love others he is for, we are going to move into the next part of our series, which we've called 7 Words to the Church Today. And we've looked at the book of Revelation, especially the beginning part, where there are these messages to 7 different churches in a region in the first century called Asia Minor. And they've had to wrestle with, who are we in light of a world that seems bent against our entire worldview and philosophy of life? And so, let's dive in. Because here's the thing, the Bible in general has lots to say about doors. I have a few things to say. For instance, my door has a leak on both the top and bottom, and this is my own problem. I should go get the little foam and fix it. Haven't done that yet. But you know, my door is leaky and airy at night, and I'm like, man, that new furnace is getting a little extra work this winter if I don't deal with this, right? But in the Bible, open doors, they're wide open. They're not just cracked, they're wide open. And when a door is open, when this metaphor is used, the clarity around it is that we have an opportunity to be part of something great. I want to read you a few passages. They'll be on the screen here really quick. Just kind of a spread. Most of them are New Testament, but we'll end in the Old. Paul, this traveling preacher, this teacher, we call him the Apostle Paul. He was so convinced that the gospel of Jesus had changed his life that he had to tell everybody about it. And this is what he says. He says in 1 Corinthians 16, he says, for a wide door for effective work has opened to me, and there are many adversaries. So he says, look, there's a big open door. I'm going for it, but it's not easy because some people don't want me to do this. Some people will tell you in your life, by the way, do not walk through the door. Don't do it. And you have to decide how you're going to manage adversity. In Acts 14, it says, on their arrival, they gathered the church together and reported everything that God had accomplished through their activity and how God had opened a door of faith for the Gentiles. In other words, they'd been doing ministry, and they were doing ministry outside of their Jewish pockets early in the church's life. And as they did that, the open door, again, was about the opportunity to bring others into the family. In other words, people were neighbors to other people, and they said, let's talk about Jesus. Do you want to know how you can have meaning and satisfaction and purpose in your life? And these were people that didn't look like them. If you want to talk about the world we live in right now, if you want to talk about Calgary, so often I think some of us are intimidated by others of us who look different than us. And yet in the New Testament, that's the very thing that carried the mission forward, was deciding people who aren't like us are loved like us by God. And so they kept pressing in. 2 Corinthians chapter 2 put it this way. Paul, again, he's saying, now when I went to Troas to preach the gospel of Christ and found that the Lord had opened a door for me, ... You can imagine where that's going. Right? So this imagery of the door comes up over and over again. And the backstory to this is actually found in Isaiah 22:22. It says, I will place the key to David's house on his shoulder. What he opens, no one will close, and what he closes, no one will open. You know, if you've ever missed an open door, it's not a good thing, especially if it's in the dark. I was hanging out with some new family friends. We met some folks through Lydia's figure skating classes, and they came over, and kids were playing upstairs. They had all the lights out because they were playing with this karaoke machine that just does glitter lights or whatever all over the place, you know. But then the machine turned off, and my youngest 4-year-old Chloe is up there, and we're downstairs sort of just listening for the echo. And all of a sudden, we hear this massive thump. And we're like, oh no, because some of the older kids have been jumping off the lofted bed, but the thump was followed by Chloe, almost 4-year-old, crying her eyes out. And I thought, oh, and I ran. I just sprinted up there because thinking maybe she fell off the loft, like what just happened? Here's what happened. The closet door was open, she didn't know, and her face said hello to the edge of the door, right? She didn't know the door was open, and so it smacked her in the face. Lesson learned? I don't know. Sometimes, though, lesson learned, right? Sometimes when the door is open and you don't notice, sometimes the only way to wake yourself up to it is it kind of gets in the way of what you're doing. That was the Apostle Paul's journey, right? He's journeying, he's out to persecute Christians. He doesn't think they're doing good. And then God interrupts, smacks him in the face with the metaphorical door and says, your life isn't about you, it's about me. Wake up. And here's the deal. This pattern shows up again in a first century church in a city called Philadelphia. And that's what I want to spend the next 15 minutes or so unpacking together. And it's going to become clearer and clearer that Jesus opens up the door to love neighbors he is for. This is going to be just something we take with us because this, my friends, I want to suggest is the open door that all of us have available to us if we have the eyes to see it. So, quick recap, because some of you have been here for part of the series. Maybe you're new. And if you're new, welcome. But we're going to just a couple of quick things. There's a letter at the end of the Bible called Revelation. It's apocalyptic, it's cryptic, it's interesting, but it's written to a bunch of churches in a real place called Asia Minor in the first century. And there's a map actually you can see of these places. John the Elder is on this little island called Patmos. He's been exiled there by local authorities, probably because of his message about Jesus. And so he writes this circular letter that starts in Ephesus and will go around the horseshoe all the way through these cities. And we have now landed in Philadelphia, which is not where the Eagles play football for any of you who know the NFL. This is the real Philadelphia. This is the real deal. This is the city of brotherly love from the ancient world. And we'll talk more about that in a moment. And so that's kind of the setup here. And each church has had something commendable, something not commendable, something they can do. And it's all rooted in a world saturated by evil and by a Roman Empire that's set up to cause pain and suffering, especially for the people at the bottom of the whole stratosphere of society. So one more slide here about background. We've tried to give a simple summary of Revelation this way. We've said the last book of the Bible is a revelation of Jesus. So it's if you have anything you need to know about Revelation before you get to all the weird stuff and dragons and beasts and all the stuff, what you need to know is that the first opening line sets up the entire context of this apocalyptic book, and it is that this book somehow, some way reveals Jesus. It is not a different Jesus from Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. It is Jesus. And so we have to read it through that grid. It's written to someone named, it is a message that is given to John. So John is writing it down and capturing it. It's for the church, for the 7 churches, and then for the church throughout the ages. It's against the empire, both the invisible, spiritual, demonic empire and the empire of the first century that was causing so much pain and suffering. It's during the first century, and the book closes with hope for a future that is so much better. And that's the Christian message. There is hope in the future, and that hope has ramifications for how we live here and now. So, let's jump into this passage really quick. Revelation chapter 3, verse 7 starts this way. It says, "Write this to the angel of the church in Philadelphia." And we'll pause here, and we can keep that on the screen. But Philadelphia is a city that actually is named after a former king of Pergamum, who, this king of Pergamum was known for his love for his brother. Isn't that nice? right? And so he was so known as someone who loved his brother, literal brother, that they eventually would name this city in honor of that, Philadelphia. And it's an interesting thing because what it ends up being, because of its strategic geographic location, it ends up being considered a gateway to the east. And what they meant by that is that as Greek and Hellenistic culture after Alexander the Great has kind of conquered and done all this stuff a couple hundred years before Jesus, he spreads culture through this city. And it's almost like they're missionaries of Greek culture. It's very fascinating. As you read commentaries from Revelation, many of them just continue to bring up, like, they believed that Greek language was a big deal. They believed that Greek culture was a big deal. And so they did all they could to honor the empire and to spread those values. It was also the newest of the 7 cities in all kinds of ways. And it's fascinating because what you have in history is over and over again, they build this city up and then it falls flat to the ground because it was on a good old fault next to a volcano. It would get destroyed. Earthquake after earthquake. In fact, one earthquake in 17 AD destroyed not just the city and the pillars of the great buildings and all the stuff, but most of the population is annihilated in 17 AD. And also the other town near it, Sardis, also falls victim to it. Then, of course, other earthquakes follow. They're trying to rebuild. They try to rebuild. And then the Emperor Tiberius will rebuild it, give lots of resources to it. This is all during the first century. And at that time, the city gets a new name. So it's called Philadelphia, then it's called Neo-Caesarea, which basically means new city of Caesar, right? And Caesar being the family of the emperors. And so this was like new Caesar city. And they really owned that identity. They were grateful that they had been taken care of by the Romans in this way. And then under Nero, later on, Nero, the emperor, who was there in the 60s mostly, 50s and 60s, Nero renamed it to Philadelphia Flavia because he was part of the Flavian line of emperors, right? So everyone wants to have something named after him. So now it gets another new name, but it's kind of a throwback to the old. And so over and over again, this city will be renamed after it's destroyed, rebuilt. It's like its identity is in flux. But the one thing that it held strong was that Greco-Roman culture was the thing that they needed to champion throughout the world. Okay, let's keep going. So the passage continues. It says, there are these, sorry, I have like a hair in my eye, I think. You ever have that happen, but in front of like hundreds of people? It's very weird. I don't know. Anyway. These are the words of the one who is holy and true, who has the key of David. Whatever he opens, no one will shut, and whatever he shuts, no one opens. I know your works. Look, I've set in front of you an open door that no one can shut. You have so little power, and yet you have kept my word and haven't denied my name. Verse 9 continues. Because of this, I will make the people from Satan's synagogue who say they are Jews and really aren't, but are lying. I will make them come and bow at your feet and realize that I have loved you. Okay, so lots going on here. Of course, the open door. We'll start with the open door imagery. And what we kind of sense here, and we're going to build on this a little bit, is that there's really two things going on when we talk about the open door in this passage. And you can probably intuit it a little bit because we've seen multiple other Christian examples of open door language usually being about the good news of Jesus being presented to others. So in one sense, the open door is just an invitation to live in God's realm of reality, the kingdom of God, now and forever. I think there's a slide that'll depict this. Yeah. And then the second thought here is that it's also an open door to invite others into the Jesus-centered life even those who oppose you, who don't look like you, who make you uncomfortable, who don't fit what you hope they would fit. And there's this sense, right? This cultural reality in Philadelphia is we are people who love Rome and we love Greek culture and we spread that everywhere we go. And here Jesus is saying the door is open to spread a different philosophy, a different way of life. Step through the door. And you may have noticed this interesting phrase. You have so little power. Have you ever felt powerless? Have you ever felt like you wanted to do something meaningful in your life, whether you're a Christian and you want to be meaningful in how you live as a Jesus follower, or maybe you're wrestling with faith and this stuff, but you're like, I want my life to have purpose, but I don't know that I have the resource to pull it off. You know, it's one of those scenarios that we see highlighted here. And we get the context after we hear, like another church in our series, that there is a so-called Satan synagogue. And a synagogue in a local place like this would be huge. There would be massive groups of Jewish people who collectively made the synagogue community of a city. And the followers of Jesus would not be huge. At this point in history, there were small pockets meeting. Sometimes they would go to synagogue because they're Jewish, many of them, and still connected to that. But they would worship at home. They'd worship in small groups. And they would collectively try to figure out what it meant to be a minority group in a city where not only is this sort of Jewish thing really big, but then, of course, the Roman imperial system is even bigger, where you're supposed to worship all of these other gods. And what ends up happening is you have here not anti-Jewish sentiment, because you have to understand that Revelation is written very Jewishly. That most of the people who would have read these letters and this book as a whole would have been Jewish converts to Jesus. And what you have here is an this is like technical jargon, intra-Jewish dialogue, right? So it's different than saying, hey, we're not Jewish and you guys are terrible at it, right? This is, we're Jewish, you're Jewish, and we disagree on something fundamental to our identities. That's why you have, in Jesus' time, Sadducees, Pharisees, Essenes, all kinds of different groups of Jewish people. There were different ways to be Jewish, and now Christianity, Messianic Jewish Christianity, is another stream. You following? They don't have radical departure for several centuries on the whole. And so there's this idea here that, hey, they say they're Jews, but according to this message from Jesus, they don't know it, but they're being influenced by the dragon, the Satan. And what really is going on here is the question, who counts as truly Jewish? And you may remember this from other talks. To be Jewish in the first century had one advantage, that you were not required to worship foreign deities. You were exempt from worshiping the emperors, the goddess Roma, the gods of the empire in general. And so there was safety in that. But if you refuse to do those things and are not Jewish, you would be in big trouble with the authorities. And so there's tension about, we have to figure out who is really Jewish. And you can imagine all the pressure coming from this larger group of Jewish folks when this small pocket of Jesus followers are like, but we're Jewish too. Who really counts? And of course, I don't know if you caught this, but verse 9 is so fascinating. Because it says, I will make them come and bow down at your feet and realize that I have loved you. At first I wanted to say, oh, this has to be worded weird, right? Because I don't want people bowing at my feet. That's weird, isn't it? Right? Like I want people bowing at the feet of Jesus. So like, what's happening here? And it's really, really crazy because I was wrestling with this, and then one commentator brought it all to clarity. You remember the story of Joseph and his brothers in Genesis? Early on in the story of Joseph, Joseph is this young brother who starts having these visions and dreams. And he has this vision of himself, and really the interpretation of the vision has to do with he would be receiving the bowing of all of his brothers. Now, if you're a big brother or big sister and you get this sort of news from a younger sibling, that doesn't fly really well, does it? And so they eventually actually decide we're going to sell him into slavery. And the story goes that because of this vision, he gets sold into slavery. And then at the end of the story, by the way, it's a spoiler alert, but this is at least 3,000-year-old story, so catch up, right? Sorry, that was rude. But you get it, right? And so the end of the story is this. He ends up being one of the highest ranking officials in Egypt. And during a famine, his brothers literally will bow down to him because of his position of authority. They don't immediately know it's their brother. But when it all comes together, the point is clear. This had nothing to do with the brother at all. It had everything to do with God and God's provision during a time of suffering that was going to come. Because now, the brother who was a slave turned prince, essentially, could now save the people and his family. So what we notice here then is that, yes, this is a vision of what happens when people who are your adversaries become people who now are your friends. This is an image of what happens when God does something that seems so unexpected. When the door is open in such a way that all of a sudden people start coming through the door who were opposed to you. This is what happens when we take the risk to step through the door. The passage continues. It says this in verse 10. Because you kept my command to endure, I will keep you safe through the time of testing that is about to come over the whole world to test those who live on earth. I'm coming soon. Hold on to what you have so that no one takes your crown. Verse 12, as for those who emerge victorious, I will make them pillars in the temple of my God, and they will never leave it. I will write on them the new name of my God and the name of the city of my God, the new Jerusalem that comes down out of heaven from my God. I will also write on them my own new name. If you can hear, listen to what the Spirit is saying to the churches. There's a lot here, and we can't dive into every nuance. But Jesus says, look, suffering is about to come. It's going to be major suffering. Be ready for it. And he tells these first century followers, when that happens, I will be there. I will be with you in it. And he says, look, the other side of all of this is a new identity. New creation is coming. You'll be named over and over again. I get a new name. I mean, everyone gets a new name, and we wonder, oh, that makes sense in Philadelphia. Jesus contextualizing the message, right? That you're going to be a strong pillar that doesn't fall down perhaps in an earthquake. That there's victory, there's safety, there's honor, there's new identity. And ultimately, the new Jerusalem, which is the picture that we get in the book of Revelation, where God restores, heals, and finally forever brings heaven to earth to be our forever home. You know, challenges are real. Adversaries are real. Pain is real. And in all of that, Jesus says the door is still open. Jesus opens up the door to love neighbors he is for. This passage is an invitation to live in God's kingdom, live in God's reality, no matter what happens, no matter what's going wrong, no matter the other doors that feel like they've hit you in the face. You have a door that is always open to you, Christian or not. If you're not a Christian and you haven't stepped through the metaphorical door of faith in Jesus, here's the good news. He's not holding the door for people that he just says, I like you, I don't like you, I like you, I don't like you. It's the door is just open. Come and see and be part of the beautiful thing that happens when Jesus grabs hold of your life. And so I want to invite us to do a little homework this week. I want to invite us as a church to think about what this might mean. And so the slide will say this: reflect. If you have a camera, you can take a picture, How can I be intentional this week to step through the door towards neighbors, coworkers, and others who aren't yet connected to a local church? How can I do that? It's one thing, and here's a suggestion: just start praying. What if you had 3 people or families or households? You might not even know the names of people who live in houses in your neighborhood. But ask God to give you 3 areas, 3 people, 3 networks of people to pray for. And just say, you know what? I don't know what this means. It doesn't mean you're going to walk over there and say, here's 4 spiritual laws, become a Christian. It means you're going to learn to step through the door and be people who are present like Jesus is present to us. To love. So often we take these opportunities for granted. And I'm one of these people. We forget that the door is open. We forget that next door might be the person who, if we step through that door, might forever be changed. Not just their eternal salvation, which is all huge, and we want that, and we desire that, but the family unit that is restored because of Jesus' restoration now. The brokenness and addiction that is lifted because Jesus makes a difference now. The ripple effects because Jesus makes a difference now. Imagine if we committed to this pattern as if it were normal, as if, we'll have all kinds of doors that feel closed to us, but this door is never closed, and we're begging God for an open door. We're begging God for an open opportunity, and the opportunity to live in God's reality and to step towards our neighbors. That door doesn't shut. And even those who oppose us are meant to become our friends. Andy Stanley, a preacher that I respect in a lot of ways, he puts it this way about why. Like, why do we, And I just love this quote. He says, following Jesus will make your life better and will make you better at life. Doesn't mean you'll get rich. It's none of that malarkey, right? But he makes your life better. He empowers you to be a different kind of person. And that helps you and I to step into life differently. And so that's the invitation. Jesus opens up the door to love neighbors he is for. Who is near you that Jesus is for that is next to your open door? That's the invitation this week. Let's pray. So Christ, we love you. We're grateful for you. At some point in our journey, someone stepped through an open door and walked with us right through it so that we would know you. For some, it was a family member. For others, it was a neighbor, a schoolmate. And then, of course, some of us have not taken that step, but are curious about it. wherever we might be, may we find that you have an open door policy to an abundant, restored life for our sakes and for the sake of others. Thank you for holding the door open even when we struggle to see it. Pray all of these things in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit. Amen.